Could Kyle Schwarber be the bat that puts this Orioles offense over the top? We'll talk about how he could fit in Baltimore coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to run through a few pieces of Orioles news and notes that came to us over the Thanksgiving holiday break. We'll talk about some Orioles reported interest in Kyle Schwarber and why, despite already adding Taylor Ward and tendering a contract to Ryan Mountcastle, the O's could still find a way to fit Schwarber in. We'll chat about the O's hiring Mike Shildt to be a part of their player development team after he had managed the Cardinals and the Padres for the past few years. And finally, some other news and notes, a minor league signing, a new job for Brandon Hyde, and much, much more. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Just download the FanDuel app today. So we will start this Tuesday episode with a little bit of interesting news from the last week or so. John Heyman reporting last week, National MLB reporter, that the Orioles have shown some interest in free agent outfielder with mostly DH Kyle Schwarber. Now, Schwarber is projected right now to get a 4-year, $128 million contract this offseason, coming off a fantastic run with the Philadelphia Phillies, where really since the beginning of 2021, he's been one of the best hitters in all of Major League Baseball and is coming off a career year. He played in all 162 games for the first time ever in 2025. 240, 365, 563 slash. He hit 56 home runs, which was a career high. Good for a 152 WRC plus. And despite barely playing the outfield, almost being a full-time DH with no defensive value, still accrued 5 WAR over at Fangraphs. He was a fantastic hitter for Philly. Now, the assumption is that the Phillies are going to do everything they can to bring back Schwarber. For the past 4 seasons, he's been essentially an irreplaceable part of their starting lineup. He's played almost every day. He's hit 38 or more home runs in every season. He's been incredible. But there was some reporting earlier this week that at the moment, this was in late November, the Phillies and Schwarber were not anywhere close on negotiations for a new contract. Now, there's plenty of offseason left for that to change, but that was at least an opening of, hey, maybe Kyle Schwarber could sign with another team, and maybe he's not automatically going to go back to Philly. So could the Orioles, who are interested, be a team that wants Schwarber, run a 15% walk rate, a strikeout drop to his lowest rate since 2021. He was first in hard hit rate and third in barrel rate among all qualified big league hitters in 2025. And he does swing and miss a lot. There's definitely a hole in his game, but really no one is better, honestly, you could argue, than Kyle Schwarber when he makes contact. And it certainly would be an imperfect fit on the Orioles roster. He almost never plays the outfield anymore. He made 5 starts in the outfield in 2024. He made 8 starts in the outfield in 2025. Otherwise, he's a DH. He's not even really playing first base at all now, mostly because the Phillies have just sent Bryce Harper over to first base. He played there a little bit when he was with the Red Sox, made 9 starts at first with Boston in 2021. So it's something he's done before. Of course, he came up as a catcher as well. That is kind of way in his past. But the Orioles don't exactly have a super great opening at kind of first base, DH, corner outfield right now. He's essentially a full-time DH and would give the Orioles another left-handed hitter when they're trying to get a little more right-handed. Now, he has been better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching over the past 2 seasons, so maybe you're not as worried about the fact that he's a lefty hitter. And he's Kyle Schwarber. He's I think without a doubt, a top 10 hitter in Major League Baseball right now. And so if you're going to add that to your lineup, I don't think you really care about the fit or the handedness. You just put him in there and you figure everything out afterwards. And there are certainly some more questions now with Ryan Mountcastle being tendered a contract kind of surprisingly a couple weeks ago, which we of course covered here on this podcast that makes for a log jam at first base and DH and in the corner outfielders. But if you did sign Schwarber, first of all, let's be perfectly clear. It is something, if the Orioles are truly interested and truly open to, it's something they should absolutely try their hardest to do. If you can get him for 4 years, $120 million, or you can just put him in at DH almost every day and he can, play 10 games in the outfield and 5 games at first base just to give you a little more roster versatility, and then he's going to hit like he has in Philly the past couple of years, sign me up. I would be all in on bringing in Kyle Schwarber. You would probably have to find a way to dump 2 of these 3 players, Ryan Mountcastle, Kobe Mayo, and Tyler O'Neill. I just already with Mountcastle, Mayo, O'Neill, it's a weird roster fit. You add Schwarber in the mix. I mean, at least one of them, no doubt, would have to go. And you'd probably have to find a way to dump 2 of them. Maybe you could trade Mayo for pitching. Maybe he could be a headliner for a starting pitcher. You could try to salary dump the final, 2 years and $32 million left on Tyler O'Neill's contract with somebody. Maybe you eat a good chunk of that money and you just kind of free up his roster spot. Maybe you attach a prospect, so you don't have to pay as much of the money and get a reliever back or something like that. Maybe you could find a Ryan Mountcastle taker for 1 year at $8 million coming off a really poor 2025. But I think the most likely, if the Orioles did sign someone like Kyle Schwarber, or even if they still did, what we talked about last week, still did pursue and try and get a player like Pete Alonso, I think the most likely thing would be that they actually would keep Mountcastle and find a way to move the other 2 in O'Neill and Mayo. So if it was Kyle Schwarber, you would have a lineup of usually being Taylor Ward in left field. There are some people who are down on Colton Cowser being the Orioles' everyday center fielder. I think at this point, I'd be fine if on opening day, Cowser is the main center fielder for this Orioles team. I think he's gotten better defensively in center. I think this was a weird down year with injuries for his bat. I think it'll bounce back to closer in what we saw in the season when he should have won Rookie of the Year in 2024. I still have some trust for Colton Cowser. We need to see it a little bit more, but I still have some trust for him. But you could do Ward in left field, Cowser in center, Dylan Beavers in right, and then Schwarber would be your main DH. And then you'd have some sort of Ryan Mountcastle, Samuel Basallo platoon at first base, where Basallo would play against the righties and Mountcastle would play against the lefties. And that would still give you more room to add another outfielder on the roster who could potentially play center field. Like, yes, the Orioles did sign Leody Taveras to a 1-year deal earlier in the offseason, so he would be kind of sitting there right now. But even with Ward, Cowser, Beavers, Taveras, I mean, Schwarber's not really an outfielder. And if you're trading O'Neill, you could probably sign or trade for someone. I mean, the top of the line would be to add a Harrison Bader type player. That would make this a really, really strong position player group, or a lesser type who's similar to Taveras, but maybe fits the roster a little bit more, is certainly something that you could do. Just the addition of Kyle Schwarber, what it would really do besides make you make other moves is it would make it tougher to kind of rotate in Basallo and Adley Rutschman into that DH spot. Because if you're signing Kyle Schwarber, could he play the field, 10 to 15 times per year? Yeah, he could to help you out. But for probably 150 games, if he's healthy, he's going to be in your DH spot almost every day. It would open more first base for Basallo if you did move someone like Mayo. And he's shown he's pretty good defensively there. Like, I think you can absolutely trust Samuel Basallo defensively to play first base. I mean, heck, you could even play Adley at first base every once in a while if you wanted to. And again, Schwarber made 9 starts there for Boston in 2021. I think he could hold down the position 10 times or so if you needed him to. Now, talent-wise, cost-wise, age-wise, I've made it pretty clear I would rather keep Kobe Mayo over Ryan Mountcastle, but the Orioles tendered a contract to Mountcastle, and Mayo has far superior trade value than Mountcastle was. So if you're still thinking, which still seems like the likely outcome, that the Orioles are going to move one of those 2 guys before opening day, yes, you could still move Mountcastle, but it's so much more likely you move Mayo because you'd be able to legitimately get something back for Kobe Mayo rather than Ryan Mountcastle, and something that would help you win in 2026. And there are certainly questions about Mountcastle. There are still certainly plenty of questions about Kobe Mayo. He is not even close to proved himself as a big league hitter yet. You could still make your team better for 2026 if you're really going for it. Now, I still don't think the Orioles are going to get Kyle Schwarber. I still think he's going to end up back in Philly. But at the end of the day, like, if you have a chance to add Kyle Schwarber to your roster, this is going to sound maybe a little mean, but I don't care about Ryan Mountcastle, Kobe Mayo, or Tyler O'Neill if you can add this current version of Kyle Schwarber. That's something that takes your offense to an entirely different level. And adding him and Ward in the same offseason and holding on to your important guys, right? If you're losing Mayo, Mountcastle, and O'Neill, like, okay, fine. None of those guys were even a league average bat in 2025, and you're adding one of the best hitters in baseball in someone like Schwarber. That is a gigantic W for the Orioles if they were able to do that. So I know, the roster fit would be a little tricky, and are the Orioles going to spend over $100 million on a position player? And they've already added Taylor Ward. I get all that, but they should be doing everything they can, I think, to go get Schwarber, and you can figure out the rest of it afterwards once you make a giant addition like that to your team. Away from the player side, though, on to the coaching side, Orioles made an interesting hire in player development last week. Let's talk a little bit about Mike Shildt. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, and every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or maybe the momentum flips after a turnover. We certainly saw a lot of those on Thursday night. And FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads, money lines, they adjust instantly. Those player props, they update as the guys heat up. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long at FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. So we have some other Orioles news and notes to get to here on a Tuesday episode. Do want to let you know I am recording this episode here on Sunday evening just because of scheduling things. That's super a lot of time to record on Monday. If there was some sort of crazy Orioles breaking news that happened on Monday, if it was big enough, there's a live episode. If not, you'll get it on the Wednesday show, but just wanted to kind of timestamp this one as I like to do. But let's talk about Mike Shildt, who it was reported last week that the Orioles have hired Shildt as the O's new coordinator of instruction for the upper minor leagues. Most likely he'll do a lot of work in spring training with players, and then we'll rove between the AA and AAA levels in Chesapeake and Norfolk to help out the Orioles upper level prospects throughout the year. And I'm sure a lot of the minor league coaches will report to Mike Shildt as well. Definitely this hire feels like another move that shows, hey, the Orioles are willing to make some legitimate changes, not just the major league level, but in the minor league levels of their system as well. Mike Shildt seemingly leans a little more towards kind of the old school style of coaching, comes from that era. He's only 58 years old, but kind of, presents himself like that as well. And doesn't seem to be, the most player-friendly coach, the softest coach that's out there, right? It's a little bit of a different tactic for the Orioles to bring in. Now, who is Mike Shildt? Started coaching in high school and college baseball in the 1990s, opened up his own baseball facility back then to work with high school players. The Cardinals then hired him as a scout in 2004 while Mike Elias was there in St. Louis. And then he was moved to a full-time minor league coach in 2007. Cardinals then promoted him to be a minor league manager in their system in 2009, and he managed for 8 years through 2016 in rookie ball, AA, and AAA in the Cardinals system. Then finally got promoted to their big league staff in 2017 as a major league coach, and then was promoted to be the Cardinals bench coach under Mike Matheny in 2018. But the Cardinals weren't having a great year. They fired their manager, Mike Matheny, in July of 2018, and Mike Shildt took over as the interim manager. And, the front office was so impressed with how they did. They played well enough that the Cardinals actually removed the interim tag from Shildt in late August and made him their full-time manager. And he started to have success. He took the Cardinals to 3 straight postseasons, 2019, 2020, and 2021, including getting to the NLCS in 2019. And, the Cardinals were a below 500 team for a while in 2021, and then went on that incredible 17-game winning streak late in the 2021 season to come out of nowhere to make the wild card game and get into the postseason. But the Cardinals still fired him after that 2021 season due to what they called, quote, philosophical differences between Shildt and the Cardinals front office, despite the fact that, at that point it had been 18 years that he had worked in that organization in some capacity, all under John Mozeliak, who had been in charge of things the entire time. So something clearly boiled over despite the not postseason success, but at least success in getting to the postseason. and Shildt was out. So he was rehired back into a player development role by the Padres in 2022. Was in a player development role for 2 seasons there before the Padres were looking for a manager. Bob Melvin was allowed to leave to take the Giants job, and the Padres eventually hired Mike Shildt to be their new manager in 2024. And again, he had success, back-to-back playoff trips in 2024 and 2025 as the Padres skipper. But after the 2025 season, there was a little reporting came out, maybe a little more tension between Shildt and the Padres front office with AJ Preller running things over there. And Shildt announced that he was retiring from managing after the season. Now, it made it seem like he kind of wanted to step away, citing like spending more time with his family, things like that. It was unclear if he was going to be done with baseball, done with managing, was looking for a different role, whatever it may be. But I think people took it as, hey, there was probably still some tension. He wasn't super loved by everyone to be Padres manager, but also some of it was his decision to step away. But then we get here, a month after that decision was made by Shildt, and here he is hired in another baseball job by the Orioles to be their coordinator of instruction for the upper minor leagues. Now, it probably tells us a little bit more about that there maybe was more of a strained relationship between him and the Padres front office, and there was maybe more of him being pushed out than was generally reported when he cited it more as a retirement from the role after this season. And he clearly still wants to work in baseball, but maybe with a different schedule and a different capacity with this job with the Orioles. Now, in interviews, he's always talked about how much he enjoyed working on the player development side when he did some with the Cardinals and then with the Padres before becoming the managers of each of those teams. And he brings a lot of different experience, right? He brings the scouting experience. He brings the front office experience. He brings the minor league managing, minor league coaching, and big league managing and big league coaching experience, like a ton of different things. Now, he never played professional baseball, and he's was one of the first managers to, I think, manage 2 different teams and have never played even in the minor league. So he comes from certainly a different background, and maybe these player development roles like the one the Orioles just hired him for are kind of just better for him and what he wants, but also better suited for his skills than being a big league manager. I mean, he certainly had success, a lot of wins, a lot of playoff appearances managing the Cardinals and the Padres, but maybe just for what he wants and what he likes the best, this is better for him, and maybe he'll be even more effective in this kind of role that he was clearly seeking out. The Orioles obviously were happy to bring him in on. There's also a cool connection for Shildt and the Orioles. He grew up working for the Orioles AA team that was in Charlotte at the time. His mom worked for the team as well. He became a huge Orioles fan. He became a huge fan of Cal Ripken Jr., who, Shildt was there in the early 80s when Cal was coming through the Orioles system. There's a really good story from Ann Rogers at MLB.com from 2020 when Shildt was managing the Cardinals about his kind of relationship with Cal Ripken Jr. and with the Orioles. I'll link to that one in the show notes. It's a really cool story to read, his connection to Baltimore. So we will see, not exactly the guy I expected the Orioles to bring in after he left that job with the Padres. It's never really someone I thought would be up for the Orioles managerial job when that was open. And even when they did hire Craig Albernaz, I really didn't think they'd hire Mike Shildt for some other role in the staff, especially to be a player development guy for the minor leagues. But that is where he is. It's a little bit of a different take on the generally what the Orioles go for in hiring, coaches and player development people to work in their minor league system under Mike Elias. And again, as I mentioned, I think another sign that they're willing to go in different directions to try and get fixed what went wrong in 2025. They also announced that Samuel Vega was promoted to the same role as Shildt, but for the lower levels of the minor leagues. Vega was hired in November of 2021 to be the Orioles' Latin American field coordinator and had been in that role ever since before getting this promotion last week. He seems to be really, really well liked in the system and very much a well-deserved promotion for Samuel Vega. Couple other pieces, though, of Orioles news and notes to get to. Minor league signing, a couple former coaches finding new homes. We'll talk about that to finish off the show coming up next. So a few pieces of Orioles news and notes to get to finish off this episode. We first begin with a minor league signing as the Orioles last week signed 27-year-old left-handed pitcher Andrew Magno to a minor league contract, presumably with an invite to big league spring trading. Magno, 27, will be 28 in April, was a 15th round pick of the Tigers out of Ohio State back in 2019. He was a full-time reliever in college, and he has been a full-time reliever in the minor leagues in pro ball the entire time. Now, he's pitched a lot in AAA, but he has yet to make his big league debut, and he actually spent all of 2025 in the Tiger system in Double A. Now, he had a great season, 66 and a third innings as a Double A reliever, had a 2.31 ERA with a 28% strikeout rate to an 11% walk rate, but he never got back to Triple A. Now, he had a few appearances in 2022 and 23 at the Triple A level for the Tigers, but really 2024 was the season where he spent it pretty much entirely in the Triple A bullpen, and it didn't go great. He had a 6.62 ERA in 50 and a third innings pitched as a AAA reliever, and then kind of went back to the AA level last year. Now, those AAA kind of underlying stats and data that we have from 2024, a 3% barrel rate against him is minuscule. He gets a lot of chase outside the zone, but when he throws pitches in the zone, he barely gets any swing and miss, kind of relies on getting soft contact. And when you rely on that much contact, you're not an elite pitcher. That can be a reason why you've thrown so many innings in AAA, and you're almost 28, and you still have not yet debuted in the major leagues. But the stuff is a four-seamer at 93. He's got a slider at 83 and a curveball at 77. Both those breaking balls get a ton of swing and miss. And there's also a sinker at 93, kind of a second fastball that he'll throw in there from the left side from time to time. It's a pretty big over-the-top delivery from the left side for Andrew Magno, and again, is a full-time relief pitcher. Now, for Magno, I do have some sort of connection to him, and I've seen him pitch a lot, but it was years ago. Back in 2019, his final year at Ohio State before getting drafted by the Tigers, I saw him pitch a ton. Of course, I was the radio play-by-play voice of the Maryland Terrapins baseball program, of course, in the Big Ten, along with the Ohio State Buckeyes. And Magno was like the talk of the conference back in 2019. He threw 64 and 2/3 innings as a reliever, which for a college relief pitcher is a pretty absurd workload. He had 14 saves. He had a 2.09 ERA, struck out 75 batters, and allowed just one home run all season. He was a third-team Baseball America All-American that year and was the Big Ten tournament MVP in 2019 when he helped lead Ohio State. Top 8 teams in the Big Ten get to the tournament. Ohio State was the 7 seed and went on a Cinderella run to win the tournament and punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament that year. And I was at that Big Ten tournament in 2019 calling the games for Maryland. And Ohio State went 4-1 in that tournament on the way to winning the title. Magno pitched in all 4 Ohio State wins over the span of 5 days to win that tournament. And the craziest one was on the final day of the tournament. Because of some weather delays and other issues, Ohio State had to play a semifinal game on Sunday. He pitched 2 1/3 scoreless innings in that one to help them win. And then they had to play the championship against Nebraska in Omaha, Nebraska later that same day. So you would think, okay, this reliever threw 2 1/3 scoreless. He's probably not available that same day to pitch again. And if he is, maybe it's a couple batters and that's it. No. He turned around and threw the final 3 1/3 innings pitched scoreless of that championship game later that day, holding a 2-1 and 3-1 lead the entire time to close it out and get Ohio State to the NCAA tournament. And that very next week in the NCAA regionals, that Ohio State dropped the opening game against Vanderbilt. They were then in an elimination game against McNeese State. And Magno, who didn't pitch in game 1, came in relief in the middle of that game against McNeese, and he gave Ohio State 7 1/3 innings of 1-run ball in relief with 12 strikeouts, and eventually Ohio State won that game 9-8 in 13 innings to keep their season alive. One of the more unbelievable relief performances you'll ever see in the NCAA tournament by anyone was from Andrew Magno that year. Now, again, he's climbed the minor leagues as a reliever, but still hasn't done enough to make the big leagues. Who knows what he'll be now? That was 6+ years ago. He's about to turn 28 years old next season. He's another intriguing depth arm for the Orioles. We'll see whether he starts the year in AA or AAA, but certainly will be a reliever. He'll be depth for the O's. There's definitely something there because he was probably the most impressive pitcher I saw in that 2019 season calling Maryland games, maybe except for Jake Kuchmaner of ECU, as I called him, throw a perfect game in College Park against Maryland that year. But other than that one day of Kuchmaner, among guys I saw multiple times, Andrew Magno was just ridiculous. The stuff that he had and the outs that he was getting, it was a lot of fun to watch despite being on the losing end of it a couple of times. And, again, that was 6.5 years ago. So, you never know how it's different now. He certainly put up some good numbers in AA last year, and we'll see what he can bring the Orioles. Couple other pieces of notes. Luis Vasquez, who was DFA'd last week when the Orioles made some roster moves, he has cleared waivers and was outrighted to AAA Norfolk, so he stays in the organization but is no longer on the 40-man roster. Remember, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago when the Orioles had agreed to a contract with Vasquez, who had played some games as a utility infielder for the Orioles in 2025 after coming over from the Cubs. They had kind of basically upped his salary for 2026 when they didn't have to, in order to make it less likely that another team would claim him if they put him on waivers. And here we go. They put him on waivers. He gets that salary uppage, and we have to assume that plan by the Orioles worked because he clears waivers and he remains in the organization as a depth infielder. As I talked about on a show last week, the Orioles don't have a ton of infield depth at the AAA level. It's kind of a hole in their system right now. So being able to hold on to Vasquez, who can handle the bat a little bit, but is a really slick defender at all three infield positions, that's a win for the O's to continue to have him in Norfolk as depth and a guy you can trust to call up if you have an injury and you need another utility infielder to come back to the big leagues. Next thing is Brandon Hyde apparently has a new job. Robert Murray of Fansided reported last week that Brandon Hyde is expected to be hired by the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, Murray did not have a specified role for Hyde, and I haven't checked in the last couple of days, so maybe that's been updated, but it's even unclear if it's going to be on the big league staff or on the minor league side. He kind of worked for both for the Cubs before coming over to the Orioles, but he will have another coaching job, Major League Baseball job in 2026, and he'll be in the division. If he's on the big league staff, the Orioles will certainly see him as he is a member of the Rays coaching staff. Happy for Brandon Hyde to stay in the game. I hope he gets a chance to manage at the big league level sometime down the road again. Obviously, it didn't end well, didn't work out. He's fired by the Orioles in May in his 7th season, but certainly hope the best for Brandon Hyde moving forward in his baseball career. And another former Orioles coach has found a new home. That is Grant Anders, who was hired this week by the Nationals to be a major league development coach on the big league staff. That was the role that Anders had with the Orioles for the past 2 seasons. Anders, who was hired as a minor league development coach by the Orioles in 2020, did that for 4 years, then was promoted to the big league staff in 2024, 2 years there, but then was let go this offseason as the Orioles, of course, were making the wholesale coaching changes, brought in Craig Albernaz, but Anders does settle in with the Nationals. And finally, I think this happened like over a week ago, but I don't think I ever mentioned it. Pedro Leon, who was DFA'd by the Orioles, was claimed off waivers by the Philadelphia Phillies. So the O's did lose Leon. He was claimed by the Orioles off waivers from the Astros earlier this offseason, kind of a utility infielder, outfielder, data darling, crushes the baseball, big time prospect coming out of Cuba, just has never quite put everything together. Did debut for a little bit in the big leagues with the Astros in 2024, but hasn't been back since. The O's DFA'd him, hoping to pass him through waivers, but Philly picked him up, although there's probably a chance the Phillies might DFA him at some point before opening day, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Orioles put a claim on him again, because obviously Mike Elias likes him from the Astros time, and they claimed him once. They've been known to claim guys multiple times. Wouldn't be surprised if it happened with Pedro Leon as well. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. If you're a listener, make sure you are subscribed or following the show. If you could leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps out the pod as well. We don't have no reviews on Apple Podcasts since September. It's December now, people. I'd love to see a couple of reviews on there as well. And if you have Orioles questions, you want to talk some ball, you have feedback for the show, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. We will be back tomorrow with another episode, and unless there's some big Orioles news, we're going to continue looking at free agent starting pitchers. I talked about the top arms on Monday's episode, but the Orioles probably need to sign 2 starting pitchers, or at least acquire 2 starting pitchers this offseason. And they're not both going to be from that small group of top arms. They're going to hopefully get one of them, and then hopefully get another starter who's, kind of like a number 3 guy who can slide into that rotation. I'll talk about some of the best arms on that wish list of kind of mid-rotation free agent starters coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.